Good morning. Thank you for joining us. It's amazing what a difference 1 year makes. We are truly a startup. And like many startups, we outlined a very audacious goal on what we could do in terms of tremendously transforming a relationship between two countries, not looking back for what trade relationships have been like over 40 years, but realizing, like every company in this room and every government in the world, we must constantly reinvent ourselves and outline what a strategic partnership of the future really means, not just in terms of business terms, but in terms of inclusiveness of innovation, job creation, corporate social responsibility, knowledge transfer, to where the citizens of both of these countries come together in a way to understanding the implications of why we need each other so much. 3 years ago, I said this was the most strategic relationship to the U.S. with India, and I believe that India's most strategic relationship should be with the U.S. At that time, people said it makes sense, but we really don't see it happening. As we all know, that has changed dramatically. And so it is, how do we strengthen this relationship is the key topic of this session. And I want to thank all of you for joining us here. When you spend the time to come to Washington and then go back, I know what the commitment means. I want to thank particularly our board, the 33 people who have really stuck with us, the executive committee team that's been amazing through this. But I now want to talk about and put in perspective what the big trends are that are going on around the world, and then where does that fit into what our opportunity is with the U.S.-India Strategic Partnership Forum. We all understand the symptoms in terms of what's going on with disruption occurring, with the pace of innovation changing, with the digitization occurring, social media, and the communication messages going on. But the fundamental change, in my opinion, is based upon technology. To where if you go back to the 1990s to 2010, it was the internet era, and the internet along with education were the equalizers. But you began in 2010 to move into a digital era, and the speed of that change is dramatically different, probably 2 to 3 times the speed of the internet time period, and literally in terms of its implication, 2 to 3 times the opportunity and the disruption that occurs with it. And so when you think about the success of companies in this room or of countries and government leadership, you suddenly have to think about what are the key drivers of that. The first driver and most important is companies as well as governments must get the market transitions right. And there's never been a bigger one than the digital era and how that will change every aspect of every citizen's life, every business model, government, etc. The second thing you must do as a company or as a country is don't do the right thing too long. And that's the exact opposite of what we were taught in school. We were taught just improve it 3 to 5%, linear type thinking. And this is where we must all adopt a startup mentality, thinking out of the box, thinking exponentially, because those people who think you can be a trade organization and continue the same approach after 40 years just don't understand the market. The speed will be exponential on the changes. We must learn how to innovate at a different pace and take risk. And by definition, just like a startup, whether we're large companies or governments or startups, there will be bumps and setbacks along the way. And most important, we must learn how to reinvent itself. And the pace, there is no entitlement in this new world. Just because the U.S. led an innovation in prior decades does not mean we're leaning today, and I'll share some data with you on that. I just came out of France, and I met in southern France with the top CEOs in France and the government leaders. And do you know what their topic was? Metamorphosis of France, of Europe, and the world. Now, they are the most rapidly changing country in Europe, have become the worst place in Europe to do business 4 to 5 years ago to the best in 4 years. Their startup expectation is up 4x over that in literally 4 years. And yet, instead of saying, boy, we're doing great, they're saying we have to change dramatically, and business and government leaders have to come together in a different approach. And can you imagine a French president appointing an American CEO to be his French tech ambassador? Can you imagine America appointing a German or a French person to do that? They're thinking out of the box, and they're thinking about a tremendous metamorphosis where they have to have a different attitude. Startups and the businesses have to reinvent themselves, and government has to transform just like a butterfly does. and they're willing to take the risks to make those change. But the speed of these changes are different than anything we've seen before. When you think about during the internet era, the speed was very rapid. Prior to the internet, it might take you 5 or 6 decades to fall from grace. In the internet era, and let's use an example of businesses, and let's use market capitalization of an indication of how quickly a new challenger challenged this largest player in an area. I was part of the Walmart board. We saw Amazon coming. Walmart, amazingly powerful, great, good company, and we started to change. And yet they overtook us and blew by us in 21 years in terms of market cap. America had never seen a transition like that. As you got into the cusp between the internet era and the digital era, a company called Tesla came on the market. And in 14 years, they displaced GM in terms of their market cap evaluation. It's the most valuable company. You know where I'm going. In the digital era, a company called Uber, with its strengths and its limitations, in 7 years, not as a transportation company, but a shared asset, social capability to transform past Tesla in 7 years. And now startups to displacing an existing incumbent, 3 to 4 years. So that speed of change is breathtaking. Now that's for companies, we all get it. Now, but for those of us in government, clearly government changes much slower, right? Wrong. Watch what Modi's done in India. In a period literally of a little bit over 4 years, completely transformed India from a very slow follower to a very fast leader. Had the courage to change the goods and services tax, think again about the bankruptcy issues, think about demonetization and what were the implications of it, and had the courage, regardless of the political implications, to do what was right for his country. I mentioned France. The last place you'd want to do business? 3.5 years ago, I saw at the Consumer Electronics Show, the number of French startups suddenly jumped from 66 from 38 the year before. And French business leaders suddenly said, you know, we're changing. I said, no way. And they said, John, you should invest here. And I said, I'll come to have dinner with you, but not to invest. And when I went to talk to the startups in the Consumer Electronics Show and talked to the 66 of them, it was like I was in Silicon Valley with an unusual accent. The number went 38, 66, the next year 128, the year after that 178, the year after that 274. The U.S. only had 280 companies this last year there. You're talking about France, the worst place to do business, where startups had been at 140 average for 10 years, went from 140 to 747 in 3 years. America is the innovation capital of the world, right? Do you know what our innovation number is in the Bloomberg Innovation Index? Number 1 4 years ago. Today we're not in the top 10. We used to get 90% of venture capital invested in America 20 years ago. 10 years ago, 80%. Do you know what the number is today? 53%. We used to have 61% of the unicorns just 4 years ago. Today we have 41%. We are at a 40-year low on startup. And so when you begin to think about what India is doing as a startup nation and a digital nation, and we begin to realize if we do not change, we will get left behind as a country. And the most important relationships that we should have is between India and the U.S., the 2 largest democracies, with extremely similar goals on everything from defense to inclusion of all the people, and with leaders that want to make that happen. So as we think in terms of what's in front of us, this is why we literally did a startup called the U.S.-India Strategic Partnership Forum. Not a trade organization of 40 years, but an organization that said we as business leaders with government, if we do it right together, can represent all the citizens to truly transform 2 great nations in a way that affects every citizen. And trade is important, and we grow it, and we need to be at close to 50-50, and we will. And I think India and the U.S. together will work through those issues. But it also is about making this inclusive for all the citizens of both countries. How do we launch startup programs both ways? How do we bring the startups into the large companies where that's where we help to get our innovation from it? How do we do this in a way that does job creation? How do we do it in a way that does education and knowledge transfer? This is what USISPF is about. Our ability to be a model for the future, not one for the past. And if you look at just examples of what Mukesh and Gaurav and Nivi and the whole team have done in just the last year, and watch how quickly we're transposing, use an example in education. With the knowledge exchange at Georgetown University just a month ago between our countries about how do you really begin to think about education in a dramatically different way. Or the public-private partnership that a number of our members participated with Indian counterparts in Uttar Pradesh that really focused on skills development, infrastructure, and job creation. Or the ability to think about water shortages and how do we bring together the technology from American companies and Indian companies to really address the challenges that exist in India and share best practices and what can be done. Or the area of inclusion, both geographic, gender, religion, color of person's skin, inclusion capability, to where we were the invited panelists to, after Prime Minister Modi and Ivanka Trump gave their presentation at the Global Economic Summit, to sit down with Ivanka and a number of top women in the two countries to say, how do we transform this and make it really inclusive as we move forward? And when people think about, are we recreating jobs together much more effectively than any one country could do it by itself, just ask Ajay at SpiceJet. It isn't just a $22 billion joint partnership with America and Boeing. It's going to create 132,000 jobs. So when you think about the purpose of USISPF, we're not a trade organization. Trade is one of the ways that we measure our effectiveness. It is about job creation. It's truly about win-win. It's a model for the rest of the world and what can be done. Now, I've spent a lot of time with startups. I meet on average probably 40 different startup sessions a month. In the last week in France alone, I met with 250 startups in 14 sessions. And the startups are so fun because they bring you innovation and they can be great partners with the large established companies and government on innovation, but they need the help to grow. And they're always hitting bumps. And I asked Mark Andreessen of Andreessen Horowitz, one of the top venture capitalists in America, and I said, how long does this last? He said, John, it lasts forever. Because the startups now are moving with a pace that's never been done before. And the reason I'm preparing you that is with the 14 startups I personally am invested in, I get a call every week with a problem. That's going to occur with USISPF because we are going to be a startup. We're going to go into areas that others have not done. There's going to be setbacks along the way, but we're not going to do it in an old world fashion to where we just think linearly and slowly move and we avoid risks. We're going to take risks and there'll be surprises and we're going to navigate through that. And it's important for the memberships to understand how important that is. But this window of opportunity is only going to be open once. Here's a chance to change the world, to be the model for the rest of the world on how the two largest democracies can work together in a way that's never been done before. And how business, rather than looking after our own self-interest and thinking profits, thinks about how do we play a role together with government that influences the lives of both countries' citizens in a way that's never been done before, where it isn't just about business or tech for good. It's about how do we truly strategic partner. And by the way, the bottom line will take care of itself if we do that right. I want to thank the members for their commitment to this partnership. I want to thank you and congratulate Mukesh and Gaurav and Nivi on the numbers. A startup from 0 membership to 225 members in a year. What did it take us, 35 years to get to 200 members in prior organizations? A startup that is thinking out of the box on social responsibility and job creation and education in the environment. And yet, by the way, the trade is going up very well and it will get even better. An ability to truly change the world. That window only comes open once. And it's so important we get through it. And will there be setbacks along the way? You betcha. In fact, if there isn't, and I might regret saying this, Mukesh, because it's a get out of jail card free. If you don't have setbacks, you didn't take enough risk. That's what startup mentality is about. So I want to challenge us today for all of us to become ambassadors. And we've got a number of ambassadors in the room who've done it for real, and I'm saying all of us need to do it for real, about how we make these two great nations work together in a way that has never been done before. And today we're going to outline challenges on how we can perhaps make that happen in one of the unique ways. So on behalf of the entire team, I want to thank you for joining us today. I want to challenge us to do what never has been done before and to enjoy doing it. Thank you very much.